So while Mackenzie is getting that presentation up and going, here's a picture of January at her farm on a Moscow Farmers Market vision where we were able to see her pastured poultry enterprise. And so you can see it's a really beautiful, amazing spot in north central Idaho above the town of Orofino. Mackenzie, just let me know when you're ready for me to stop my share and you can share yours.
Okay.
And I was so careful about not including a picture of myself in my.
I
had a couple.
But that was a fun day. That was fun that day.
It was a fun day.
Okay.
So in the picture, you can see that's one of the mobile tractors that I use for the chickens. The tarp is actually stapled along the front. The tractor itself is much larger. This has been used to transition the chicks onto the pasture. See, the heat lamp is in there because they're still only about 2 weeks old. I try and put the chickens on green as fast as possible. And then you can see a second tractor there behind. So they're on wheels and we move them every day. Part of the resource prioritizing is most of those tractors are all made from recycled products. So it didn't really cost me very much at all to build those. They've lasted a few years already. It's a handful of 2x4s cut to size, some old metal roofing, and a couple of old tires that I had kicking around on some broken garden carts. So it's easy to make things work if you're willing to scavenge.
Awesome. I am ready to share the presentation whenever you are.
Okay, go ahead. So January, you'll just be able to ask Mackenzie to go to the next slide when you're ready.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So for those of you who didn't catch it, I'm January Spencer. I'm from Orofino. I own Thors Forge Farms. Everybody here has been really good about covering all of the more detailed aspects of farming, and I wanted to cover the common sense parts that nobody tells you when you first get started. So go ahead to the next slide, please. So don't be afraid to start small. You're not going to start off with 400 head of cattle. You're not going to get financing for 4 head of cattle if you haven't done any farming before. So evaluate the space and time you have. Time is probably the most important aspect because it's really easy to get overwhelmed when you're learning. I know people that do ag products off of a balcony in an apartment. So you still can grow even if you don't have a 25-acre ranch like I do, or 400 acres or 4,000 acres. It's still very possible to make money if you utilize the space that you have. Look at your interests. If you don't like poop, don't get animals. It's really easy to do. Deep Roots Farm is fantastic as far as all of the agriculture that they push forward with their vegetables and the fruits that they're expanding into. So if you like animals, then there are a lot of great ways. That's what we specialize in. We raise hogs, sheep, and broiler chickens. So those are my interests and my strengths. I've got a very long tradition of farming in my history. I think I'm 9th or 10th generation that's got farm experience. So that's always been where my heart has kind of lied. So start within your comfort zone. I grew up with sheep, so that was an easy start for me. I dislike chickens, but I do them because they are in good ends to the means. They are easy and a fast turnaround. So start with something small. Here locally, we've been talking a lot about starting with basics, starting with chickens, a very fast turnaround, very inexpensive to invest in them and get started with it. Gardens, chickens, and rabbits are all an easy, inexpensive, low maintenance beginning option. And don't build up too quickly. I usually try and focus on no more than 20% growth annually, because if you try and do anything more than that, you're going to anticipate and run into problems that you didn't get when you were first getting started. Next slide, please. So I found that there's really 3 areas of farming And it doesn't matter what enterprise that you've chosen to focus on, they're all kind of the same. You have your product, which is either animals or gardens or even your natural resources like timber or hay, manure. Your harvest, which is the actual gathering of the product. So processing or release of an animal, meaning like if you're selling them on the hoof, as maybe weaner pigs or, you know, spring lambs, harvesting produce, etc. And then of course marketing. It's getting your customer, and that's really an important part, because if you can't get your product to a customer, then you're not going to have any sales. So there's really all three of these really nest together tightly, and you can't do one well without having the other well. So word of mouth, advertising, social media, farmers markets, taste tests, volunteer work. We've been talking here locally a lot about being involved in 4-H and FFA, and getting involved in your community aspects is always a great way to promote your products as well. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the next couple of slides, I kind of show you a breakdown of several products that can be produced easily, cheaply, and some suggested prices of what you can sell them for. We were talking about the same thing here about how the amount of money that you get is on a parabolic curve for how much investment you have into it. So you can sell a dozen eggs for $4, or you can sell a single chick for $4, or you can raise it to a pullet for $10, or you could raise it and butcher it and get $20, or you can make chicken stew out of it and get $25. So it all depends on how much work you want to put into it as what you're going to get back. Same thing with the walnuts. We have a walnut tree on my property. I accidentally had a 5-gallon bucket sitting there for pig feed. They sprouted. I threw them in some soil, and next thing you know, I was getting $8 a seedling for them. So there's ways to get a little bit of money with very little overhead, and it adds up. It really does. Think about Walmart. They don't get rich on a single piece. They get rich over the long haul with little incremental profits. Next slide, please. So here's another picture of my tractors. This one does not have me in it. Thank you, Colette. So here you can see my tractors have been recycled. They're used materials, old roofing. I just ran over them with a tube of silicone to fill in any old nail holes. 2x4s. These are old garden cart tractor tires that helps to move the birds daily. So your resources don't have to be brand new. They don't have to be specific to the use that you had them for. Being able to be versatile and to be able to use them for multiple things. I've used these same tractors for holding puppies. I've used them for holding piglets. I've used them for multiple different things. So having some versatility, even with what you already have on hand, is really going to make or break you in the long run. Next slide, please. So this is one of my favorite sows. Snuggles is her name. Yep, she had a litter of 15, raised them all off, awesome. So enjoying what you do, my favorite part about pigs is the babies. So I've found a niche with 4-H and raising people's piglets to a size where then they can purchase and then raise them from a finished to a finished sitting. So we don't focus so much on meat, but you can see on this slide too, I've broken it down how you can make 125 bucks for a wiener, but if you get it all the way to a processed size and sell by the cut, you're looking at $1,000. So that just depends on how much time and energy you want to put in, how much room you have, and how many resources you have available as far as being able to haul and feed and clean out pig pens. Next slide, please. This is my son. His name is Speed. He got second place in our lamb this year. So this is all part of it. This is the final piece, the marketing. So pushing our products at 4-H, promoting what we have in as many different avenues as possible is a way to reach a lot of different markets. So we really did a lot of self-promotion at the fair with our products to have people engaged in a conversation about how we raise our animals, what kind of feeds that we use, what kind of breeds that we use. You notice he's a speckle face. We do Suffolks, and then we have a Texel ram over top. Adds that beautiful loin eye that the judge was raving about at the fair. So knowing your product really helps a lot too. So you can see there at the bottom, a sheep average head price, $150, and then you can get 500, 600, depending upon your market, even up to $1,000 for a processed, fully finished sheep. Next slide, please. So I try not to do more than 20% of expansion over top of what I did. I'm a firm believer in the 80-20 rule. So 80-20 is 80% maintenance and 20% improvement. So you can see on the right, that's, yeah, poop. So this is all part of maintenance. When you have animals, then you're going to have something that you have to do, either maintaining fences, feeding, general care. Those are all maintenance parts that go into having an animal. 20% improvement. So take that extra time when you have it and do something special. On the right there is a new gate that I built for one of the pig farrowing pens. You see it's got like a little slide down door so I can let the piglets in and out into a creep feeder without the moms getting through. So those are the small improvements that we're always trying to make that help with the day-to-day. And as you make those improvements, then you have room for more improvements and more facilities, more animals. That's a really important part. I really want to stress this, the 80-20 rule, because if you try and do too much, like if you really put a lot of effort into wanting to build all brand new infrastructure without learning that maintenance portion, which is really important, you're going to find out that suddenly your maintenance has completely overwhelmed you. So small steps and baby steps, and it'll pay off a lot more in the end because you'll find out all your errors and flaws in the beginning instead of once you've already got that 400 head of cattle and find out that you don't have good fences. I think that taking that extra time to learn as you go along is really important. Next slide, please. So I just kind of want to go over, I left a little time for questions. I know Colette wanted to get some stuff said. So some important things to remember is start small. Don't run off to the bank and try and buy something that you don't know how to run. Practice everything 5 times longer than you think you need to. It lets you make the mistakes before they get expensive. Like I said, you don't want 400 head of cattle breaking out of a fence because you built it for sheep. Avoid going into debt if you can help it, because if you make a mistake when you owe somebody money, they don't care. You can start small. Start with a seedling, start with a batch of tomatoes, start with raising a couple of pigs from weaner size to butcher size. Grow some broiler chickens. It's only an 8-week commitment. If you get too big too quickly, you're going to find yourself over your head without being able to really figure out all the nuances along. You might find out that shearing sheep takes a lot longer and is a lot more effort than you want to do, but now you've got 400 heads, so what do you do? So taking that little bit of time to realize each step of the way is really a good plan. And continue your education. That's what you guys are doing here. You're continuing your education. I think that's fantastic. I'm learning all the time. My hobby of choice is looking at USDA carcass reports at midnight. So it really does make a difference in the long term, knowing your products and not being afraid to read. I love Joel Salatin. I really love reading all of his books. He's got some really common sense aspects and approaches to almost everything on the farm. And grit. I did kind of skip that a little bit. Grit is that determination, that pushing through when an animal gets killed by accident, or pushing through when a barn falls over from a snow load, or picking back up and continuing forward when you had a customer give you a bad review. That kinds of stuff is what will really set you apart from the rest, is not getting knocked down. And that's one of the most important resources you can really have is you and your own personal determination. Back to the education, market research. Like I said, USDA carcass reports at midnight. Learning what yields to expect out of a typical animal, find out what market cuts are the best value, and then that'll help you to focus your product. If you find a real big need for a real nice big loin on a lamb, then that's what you grow. You don't try and find something that's not going to fit the market research in your area. Like Ken was saying, go to the farmers markets and talk to people and find out what your customers are really wanting, or what's not there that could be there. Poultry in this area for me has been quite a nice niche to develop into because it's not readily available. And Idaho is fantastic for poultry. Like I was saying, here at site, you can do up to 20,000 birds a year off of your property without any additional permitting requirements. So that's a pretty big number. That's a lot of chickens. And that'll give you the opportunity to build your market quickly if you wanted to, and still not have a lot of expense involved into it. And then last but not least, of course, is track all of your expenses. Know your products. Just last night, as I'm working on my PowerPoint presentation last minute, I had a friend of mine who had bought a pig from me as a weaner and wanted to try and figure out what her costs were so she could sell it. And so I said, well, how much feed do you have into it? I don't know, maybe 60 bucks, she said. I said, well, I can guarantee you that your pig's going to go through at least 1,000 pounds, and I know how much your grain price is, so your feed price is right around 130 at best. Oh, I didn't even realize that, she said. So knowing all of your expenses and being able to factor those in is really going to make a big difference, because agriculture is a long game. It's not a short game. You're not going to buy something today and sell it tomorrow. You have to keep track of records for months sometimes to know how much expense you have in and how much profit you can potentially make. If you don't keep track of your expenses, this is a hobby. Your animals are pets, because that's really what it all comes down to, is that we are trying to do this as a business. We want to be successful. Even with one chicken, know how much feed you put into it. Know how much meat you get out of it. What are your yields? How is your cost efficiency? How much did you sell it for? So next slide, please. So this is my contact info. I really enjoy trying to help anybody else that's getting started. I really think that there's a lack of ag in the area, and I think that by promoting more farms and making it more center place, then we can actually be competitive with the big markets. People will know that they can go to us now for good products instead of having to go to Walmart. Most people don't even know that we exist. They really don't. They don't know how to contact you. Make it so that they know how to contact you. If people know how to find you and what products you have, then they'll know how to get them. So I try to go quick because I know that you got Ken. Ken has questions too. So that's my last slide. Colette, if
Okay, great. So that was the great presentation. And one question that we have is around feed costs. How do you estimate and or control your feed costs?
So I actually feed almost the exact same feed to almost all of my animals. I do a sprouted grain mix, and so that makes it really easy to measure out and weigh almost daily. I know that it costs me $72 to feed a pig from 2 months of age to 6 months slaughter, and I know that it costs me $22 to get a pig to weaning age, and that's counting starter mix, wormer, etc. Keeping track of those head number costs is really how you can figure out your final costs. It costs me $1.09 per chicken, and I'm into them $1.84 in feed, because I can factor out and measure exactly how much each tractor gets by the day and be able to divide that by the number of chickens in it. Does that make sense? Are there any more questions?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
What do you do for veterinary services? Do you do all your own vet work?
Oh, so the question is, who do I use for veterinary services? I do most of my own. I give as many of the vaccinations and basic medical needs as I can on site. Our closest large animal vet is in Lewiston, and so that's an hour away. They're obviously not available most weekends. For any of my large animals, that would mean loading them into a trailer and taking them down there. I've given my own sutures on animals that have had small injuries. If it gets extreme enough, I'm not afraid to utilize the animal for other means at that point. hard decisions, because it is a lot easier sometimes than taking them to the vet. There are certain things to give Bozy, which is the selenium injection that we were talking about here earlier about for sheep and goats. You do have to go to see a large animal vet for that, and that would be Lewiston Vet Clinic is where I had to take them. Yep.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. We have a question from Valley County.
Okay.
Where or how do you process your chickens? Do you sell at markets or direct to customers? And is 20,000 chickens a state allowance or county number?
Okay, so I process my own chickens on site. We're allowed 20,000 birds a year on site processing in the state of Idaho. It is not just a county requirement, it's a state acceptance. And I do market all of my chickens or direct to customer. I am permitted to be able to sell at the farmers markets, which require going to the health department and getting a food handler's permit, having my water tested, and having a good waste management plan. And then at that point, it would be legal to sell at farmers markets, institutions, schools, supermarkets, and whatnot within the state of Idaho. To get USDA processing, you'd have to go to Boise. That's the only one available for poultry. And then you'd be able to sell across state lines.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you for that presentation. Right now, we don't have any other questions, but I'm sure that some will come up as we move forward. I'm going to go ahead and switch the share and move back to my slide presentation.